My name is Rachel Devaney, and I am a reporter with the Cape Cod Times. I'm also a member of the Eastern Woodland Rematriation Collective, and I sit on the board of the Women and Girls Fund through the Cape Cod Foundation. While I was raised in Centerville by my parents, Bill and Judy Devaney, I was born in El Salvador, and my lineage goes back to the Pipil tribe of Apaneca. Today, in honor of International Women's Day, I am sharing a short story from my book, Finding Fresia, a work of fiction that's still in the making. In its completion, it will feature 15 women of color, including myself, who were adopted from around the world and raised in the United States. As I travel throughout the country, interviewing adoptees and sharing stories about my adoption, as well as photos that reflect the reunification with my birth family, I spend hard moments in my truth. Today is no different as I share a small piece of myself with all of you, my Cape Cod family. Throughout my childhood, I spent hour upon hour playing in Long Pond in Centerville, a tree-lined waterway that held all sorts of treasures. Gorgeous emerald green-headed drakes, followed by their hens and yellow fluff-covered ducklings. Swans that sauntered across the water, and red-streaked painter turtles that scuttled and skittered through sandy shorelines and along lily pads that stretched across the pond. On the hottest summer days, I collected cement blocks from around the property, the kind with sand, gravel, and tiny little periwinkle shells embedded within the bricks. I loaded them onto my boogie board and swum them to the center of the pond. One by one, I gripped the bricks tightly on either side and pushed them into the water. As I held on, I flew through the darkness of the pond. I often pretended to be a mermaid, my long black hair flying behind me. It was just a few moments before I reached the bottom, but in that time, I allowed myself to dream about who I was and where I came from. I always felt a closeness to the water, a kinship with the trees, and to the marine life that surrounded me on Cape Cod. But my adoption from El Salvador was somewhat of a mystery. Who were my birth parents and what were my tribal lines? In those short spurts of time, I escaped judgment and felt the pain of abandonment peel away from my body. The weightlessness of the water brought me momentary peace. Almost 40 years later, the same calmness cradled me as I swam through Lake Coatepeque in El Salvador. Surrounded by volcanoes, the Crater Lake's waters were clear, warm, calm, yet powerful. A kind of rebirth came over me as I thought of all the souls who soaked in the water for thousands of years before me. I allowed myself to embrace the freedom of knowing where I came from. A reclamation of who I was had already begun 3 years earlier, after I was reunited with my birth mother, Alba, my brother, Edwin, and my sister, Wendy, as well as many nieces, nephews, cousins, aunts, and uncles in 2018. But that's another story for another day. When I arrived to my family's home in the mountains of Ahuachapan during the summer of 2021, I was mesmerized by the humble 2-story home built by my grandparents, Leonor and Simeon. With any wave of the wind, mangoes fell from the tree that canopied the house. Thud, thud, thud onto the blazing hot tin roof. The mango tree was planted by Simeon many years before El Salvador's Civil War, a time that not only stole acres of farmland from my family, but also the lives of more than 75,000 indigenous people. The mango tree, which is now solid and strong, wound its way through the center of the postage stamp-sized property, its branches peeking in and out of the house, its arms roaming up to the heavens. At its base was a wealth of dark red clay, used to make comals, or cooking stones. The smell of smoke and fresh ground corn tortillas hung in the air at all times. On special occasions, my family made pupusas and simmered tamales outside in giant pot steamers. The first time I met my 96-year-old grandmother, Leo is what everyone calls her, she showed me how to wrap tamales. As each banana leaf passed through her hands, she tugged gently, ripping the frond into sections so it could be filled with seasoned meat and masa. On one of our visits, as we cooked together, she told me the story of her bees. She and my grandfather were beekeepers before the war. Charmers, she said. Bees were smart. They had a rhyme and a reason for the way they moved and protected their queen. The oldest bees were stationed in front of the hive to keep the colony safe from intruders. They had the most developed stingers and the strongest potent venom. They also had the least to lose by dying, she said. The only person the elder bees let near the hive was my grandfather. They recognized his scent, she said. If anyone else came close, they attacked. When it came time to harvest the honey, my grandmother dried out corn cobs to create smoke, which was sprayed throughout the hive, an attempt to distract the bees. Once the honey was safely secured, my grandmother cooked the honey in order to separate it from its wax. 2 sisters from a nearby village would purchase the wax and make candles for funerals. When someone died, our tribe, the Papil people, took the body into the home, and family, friends, and neighbors stayed overnight alongside the departed. That's how we say goodbye, she said. The following day, the body was buried, and families continued to join together. I recalled that story as I soaked in the Pacific Ocean, which was just south of my family's home. As I looked out into the endless waves and the water rocked me gently back and forth, I felt my grandmother's matriarchal strength. A powerful union of love and survival through war, through migration, and through indigenous salvation. It's through her that I can reclaim my story and allow the water to carry me home once again. On International Women's Day, I encourage you all to share your stories and celebrate women for who we are and the eternal strength we carry within. Thank you all for listening.